Hey, Mike, what's going on?
What's happening with you? How you doing?
All right, how you feel today?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. I had took another day off, man, just to get everything cleared up. But I'm back in the flow of everything, man. I meant to call you, man, about the events we seen on Saturday and get your take on it, man. What's the first thing that stood out to you?
All right, I was just scrolling through the internet and I listened to a segment that Showbiz did, and I totally disagree with him. But that happens a lot in boxing. He said that Speedy Rashidi lost that fight, and the judges had it absolutely right. And I don't agree with that because even his corner told him that, look, you got to knock this guy out to win. Now, granted, I know sometimes corners will say that to a fighter to encourage him to go ahead and do what he have to do to try to end it. But I think his corner was spot on during the point when they told him he needed a knockout to win. I totally agreed with that. Even when we heard the first ruling by the first judge that called the fight a draw, we didn't even agree with that fight being a draw. And then when the second two came in, having him losing, to me it was a total case of what they call a rob. He won that fight based on what he had accumulated throughout the fight, and I think he has secured the win. Now, let's say if that fight had to go another round, there's a possibility he may not have been able to survive another round because he was slowly fading.
Right.
But as far as the end of the fight, him ending that fight on his feet, I think that was enough to secure the win for him.
Yeah, I had him winning the first 8 myself, and like you said, his corner did tell Romain Villa that he needed a knockout to win, and he didn't succeed in that. Somebody was saying that part of it was because of Romain Villa not going to the right corner and that whole count thing, because he was saying that by the count, if you would have looked at it, Speedy Rashidi wouldn't have survived that count. That's what they were saying. But I also heard some information about from what's his name, Samson, who's promoter of Romain Villa, and they said that they did their homework on Rashidi, and then they know that he tends to fade after the 6th. So the game plan was to reserve something in the tank and ratchet it up after the 6th, and that's pretty much what they did. I listened to Teddy Atlas. I was just listening to the tea leaves and everything. He pretty much pointed out the same mistake today that I pointed out yesterday, and that was Speedy Rashidi got caught coming straight back and with his hands down. And I said, when his hands down, it's man down. But those 2 knockdowns in the last thing, I don't really see how mathematically that would put him, that would have put him over the top. But when you got things like that really be the impetus for them to change them scorecards. Because I always question this. A lot of the times, as a result of what happened in the fight, as a result of those knockdowns, when the scorecards came in, we don't know if them scorecards were doctored up because of that. And the other thing that I pointed out, and I think this is important for the people that think that these pure boxers, these hit and not get hit boxers, even though that was Floyd, but that style, this is what happens with that style. Some of the ring generalship gets tipped in the favor of the aggressor, even if he's not being more effective in his punching. Why? Because those judges in this era, this is what I'm noticing, the judges are actually maybe awarding some of those rounds because they're saying that the aggressor is being more of the ring general. So if you are one of them pure boxers, this is a case to where sometimes this hitting and not getting hit and avoiding all that through a 412, unless your conditioning is 100%, sometimes you're not going to be able to get away with it, and you may be losing rounds that you really efficiently, as far as punch for punch, hitting and missing, you may have won, but the judges may be giving your opponent those rounds, because that's the only thing I saw in the early round. I didn't see a round in the first 8 that they could have gave him, but I'm thinking, okay, because he was the aggressor, he was the one trying to bring the fight to Rashidi. You know, that's the only thing I can say that they did in hindsight because of the drops. Now, if those drops wouldn't have happened, man, I would have loved to see those scorecards. What do you think about that?
Listen, based on what you're saying, you have to be absolutely right, because based on the final score count, they had to be giving him rounds earlier in that fight that we thought that Rashidi was clearly winning. But based on the final tabulation, it was not the way we saw it on their scorecards. You are absolutely right. They were giving some of these rounds to Villa when it looked to us that, you know, Rashidi was totally winning these rounds, but that was not the case. When you look at the scorecards and you look at how they finally scored that fight, it didn't go the way we saw it.
Right.
So you are absolutely right. But I'm going to tell you another thing you pointed out from your observation in that fight. You clearly saw that Rashidi was starting to run out of gas, because you mentioned it. And that part of the fight, I will totally have to agree with, because he barely ended that fight on his feet. Because if that fight had to go one more round, I don't know if he would have been able to sustain one more round. He barely sustained the last round. So it was a clear indication that he ran out of gas and was being hit and was being hurt and was in survival mode.
Yeah, I think it was at the 6th. That's why I put it in my notes. I said, is Rashidi starting the gas in the 6th? And, you know, listening to some of the analysis and all that, you know, some people that were justifying the victory for Romain Villa, they were saying that it was a result of the pressure and of the times when Villa got through and hit that actually caused the gas tank to wear down. So it's just another way that in hindsight they could actually, you know, doctor up them scorecards, because, you know, not that we're going to get on the tank just yet. I'm going to ask you about a couple of things, but let's just say that tank fight, if that thing would have went a full 12 and Tank would have never got the knockdown, it would have been very interesting how they scored it. But being that he actually was, you know, got the stoppage and he refused to come out, you know, the scorecards might have showed something. But when we look at the numbers, and I broke down some of the numbers, but I'm not gonna get into that, but it's just a way that how they justify these scorecards, man. That's why you gotta, if whatever round fight you come into, you gotta come to that fight with that level of condition. So if you're in a 12 round fight, you gotta come with 12 rounds of conditioning. You gotta know how to get you gotta know how to tie up and clinch, because one thing about Devin, you know what I'm saying, I might not like it, but if that man's in trouble, or if he, you know, need a breather, or, you know, whatever, he definitely knows how to clinch, and that's a veteran tactic that you gotta have when you're dealing with these pressure fighters, man. You gotta, if your gas tank is run, you gotta pull out some of the tools or the tricks. Sometimes it's not footwork. Sometimes it's not necessarily adjustment, even though I think there could have been adjustments made on behalf of Speedy. I still think he won. I just think that whatever round, if you come into an 8-rounder, have at least 10 rounds of conditioning. If you come into a 10-rounder, have at least 12 rounds of conditioning. If you come into a 12-rounder, have at least 15 rounds of conditioning. Because we know that was a big factor, whether Romain Villa caused it or not, or whether that was just the history, because again, his team and the people behind him had studied Rashidi and said that was the game plan. Let me ask you about Andrew.